was a well thought out set of scenarios. And this scenario is almost like we anticipated that the likely outcome to make if we do something about crime and violence and growing the economy and dealing with some of the social problems. We also have a more disturbing one called Paradise Lost. You remember it?
All right, let me jump in there just because it gets so interesting because Dr. Hughes will actually be sharing a bit about the 4 scenarios as we go along because it's a part of our time together. But so folks, what do we do about a vision for Jamaica? How do we engage with any kind of picture of the future? And given the fact that any vision of the future that we want, including one that is crime-free, isn't happening in a vacuum, but it's happening because of a history, it means we have to account for where we're coming from, which is Vision 2030. So I'm Francis Wade, and I know all of you, but we'll do some introductions in just a moment. But you're here because you're someone who believes in a vision of our country, and you want something great to happen. However, you're also aware that we've tried to make great things happen, and then we've not succeeded at a level that we could. Some things we've made progress, but in the big areas which would affect the man on the street, we've not seen the kind of progress that we wanted in spite of our best visioning. So here we are on the 21st, and we're here to tackle that question together. And as you see, the group of folks around us who are with us today are people who are committed to a future for Jamaica. Try and move forward. And today we're going to explore how do you produce a vision in a country in which people have lots of visions, but also a history of not producing results as a result of the visions that have been created. So welcome. I know we've all introduced ourselves here who are here in person, but I'm going to ask us to introduce ourselves also online so that we know who we're speaking with and who's with us and who's not. So I'm Francis Wade. The reason I'm here is because I wrote an article for the Gleaner that Chris Issa read, and he called me up and he essentially said, put your money where your mouth is and do something about it. So I'm here because he said, well, I'll pay for the room. You just show up and instigate the conversation. And I accepted his challenge, and I'm happy to be here. I'm a strategist, a management consultant, and I work with my spouse, Dale Pilgrim-Wade, in our company. Dale?
One second. Persons online, you can hear us clearly, right?
I can hear.
Maureen, you can hear us?
Yes, you can.
David?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, good.
Great, we'll have you introduce yourselves in a moment. So if you just introduce ourselves really quickly, who we are, our names, and where we're from. So nice and loud so that folks who are dialing in can hear.
Good evening. I'm Dale Pilgrim Wade, Trini by birth, raised in the U.S., followed Francis back to Jamaica, and I now work with them. I came to the meeting because he said, "Babes, please come." I hate to say it, but that's
also all we talk about. But
Hi, I'm Pat Francis. Committed Jamaican, and committed development person, and certainly, but also very private sector focused. As one of the drivers that I think we underutilize in our whole development strategies. So I think it's important that engagement of private sector in finding solutions is very important, and perhaps is one of the reasons why we don't actually get the results that we're talking about, because we seem to have the same people in the room all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And those people are not necessarily the people that can make things happen. And I guess because we're familiar with various people, so we call the same people to the same meetings all the time. And we get sometimes the wrong results. But I think it's not a question of the what. I think it's a question of the how. I think that's our real challenge, is the how. Because even in the Prime Minister's speech, the Prime Minister's speech could probably mirror 2030, our National Industrial Policy that was done by Don Harris. But it's how. How do you move from an idea to execution to ensuring results? I think that's where we fall down all the time, implementation.
That's why we're here. That's what brings us. We wouldn't be here if implementation were easy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pat.
Sharina is a development practitioner, and Pat mentioned about the implementation and the how. About the how. I've been involved in the how in terms of designing and implementing activities that really speak to development of persons here in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean.
Great. Thanks, Cherie. Chris.
Well, from a family history point of view, you mentioned Don Harris, is a scholar. My great-grandfather established that scholarship for young people to come back to Jamaica to help build up the country, and that's kind of the DNA that runs through me, and I try to just do what I can along the way. So Dr. Hughes and I were in contact from, I think just around when he was retiring, and I followed some conversations up with Dr. Henry at the IOJ, wanted to learn that Vision 2030 was maybe on a shelf and it not really seem to be in any part of that mandate. So when your article came up and I said, well, yes, it's 2024, 2025, 2030 is around the corner. Where are we? And so I'm glad that you took up the opportunity to see where can we go or get the conversation. But I think not by chance, but I think that your writings have caused some thought on the topic to where the Prime Minister is now, supposed to be putting forward a vision, but and the editorial in Hughes Observer also spoke about that. But I think it's very timely, and with Dr. Hughes here, I'm sure he can benefit from where things were before he retired, and how he thinks best for us to go forward as a country. I think I take what Tata said very wholeheartedly. I have never really been too involved in actually sitting around the table like this. So in terms of seeing what the next steps are and how we can get to some meaningful, steps or dialogue, I don't know, but I told Francis whatever help I can be of, I certainly would want to help in that capacity.
Great. Thanks, Chris. I will blame you if anything goes wrong.
Been involved in security at one point or another for the last 40 plus years, both regionally, Jamaica region, globally.
Great. Tony and I had a conversation at another meeting like this one about change management. And I didn't use the phrase in this presentation, but it's essentially what this is all about, because implementation is, we'll see, all a function of perhaps of change management. Dr. Hughes.
Wesley Hughes, consultant, economist, retired from retirement recently. Been involved in development, policy, banking, finance, planning, strategic planning, national planning. From the day Voyager 1 was launched, 1971, it has now done 21 billion miles. So that's how far I've traveled in the last almost 50 years.
Wow. Great to have you. Melissa, introduce yourself too.
Okay.
And then take us through the online.
I have two familiar faces, Maureen and Dali.
Thalia. Alright, so I'm Melissa Chung. I'm here to bring a fresh pair of ears and eyes to this session. Focusing on building a better Jamaica through NCD, as well as on a personal level through my company, providing local access to high quality products at competitive prices. And my focus is definitely the hospitality industry, but also for our retail persons as well. So just bringing convenient products to the market at good prices, high quality. So that's about me, just a little snippet. But my main focus is building a better Jamaica through NCD and in providing access to persons through my company. Food will never go wrong, right? So
Right.
that's about me.
Great, Melissa.
Okay.
Maureen?
Yes, hi, I'm Maureen Denton. If you're hearing any sounds by any chance, my grandson is close to me, so you were the grandson. Like everyone else at the table, I'm very much interested in what happens in Jamaica and how we can see the transformation. I'm not going to give up on my 2 seconds. I think we ought to try to find ways in which we can ensure that what is important to us and important to the development of the country, that we find ways to make it happen, And several of these conversations taking place, and I think at some point we just need to make sure we it's a little bit more coordinated, so that we all focus our energy on meeting the objectives that we have in mind. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Maureen.
Thanks, Maureen.
Thalia.
We have Thalia Lynn as well.
Hi, I'm Thalia Lynn.
Thalia.
Thalia.
I'm the founder of Island Grill, and I am also on the board of the NCC Group and the chair of the NCC Foundation. I feel that if I can start a company, a woman starting a company from scratch, maintaining the survival of myself and my employees, over 800, mainly single mothers who have been with me through FinFAC, through COVID, that anything is possible. And I'm very optimistic. I'm the only one of my siblings remaining in Jamaica. But I feel that if I could do something from nothing, that there are a lot of possibilities. And I think I've built a good brand. I know I've built a good brand. Not alone, with the help of all my ladies around me. Yes, there are some gentlemen as well. But I just don't want to give up hope. And I'm here because Pat Francis is there. Pat helped me in the past get EU grants. If we help one another and we stay positive, I do feel that we can get somewhere. And that's my big aim, to continue feeding as many people as possible, supporting many people as possible, and I'm looking to you all to help us to execute. We talk a lot, but we can also execute.
Excellent. Thanks, Thalia. And David McBean.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is David McBean.
I'm so sorry. I spent half an hour between Guardian Life, building and here.
We're getting introductions from the online folks. So we have David McBean introducing himself, Thalia Lynn, and Maureen Denton. And Howard Mitchell, by the way, is also, he sent his robot, so he's listening, or he's roboting in, or whatever that thing is, he's there somewhere. Sorry, David, go ahead.
No problem. So I'm David McBean. At heart, I'm an engineer. It's about identifying problems, designing solutions, implementing solutions, and find out, testing if they work, and if they don't, we come up with a new solution. And I think that describes a lot of what doesn't happen in Jamaica. And we're always, from my perspective, we're always trying to solve problems. And then very concerned about the society. Very hopeful, very hopeful about Jamaica. Jamaica is where I'm born, it's where I grew up, and it's where I hope to die. And I want to leave a better country for my kids than the one I had. And, you know, that's really why I'm here. I currently run the Mona School of Business and Management, where I get to work with young people. And I think we don't have a lot of these discussions nationally, but we have to see our voice. I see where 80% of people in higher education are seen as 20% boys. And you ask yourself, what's happening to the other 60% of boys who should be in higher education? Boys are causing us the most problems, the most social dislocation, crime, you name it. And the same effort we put into ensuring that there was equal access for women, I think we need now to look at our boys, or else it's going to be because we have scamming and that. So that's my little soapbox speech. But I'm happy to be here, and thanks Francis for inviting me.
You're welcome. So who just walked in? Carlton Davis, can you introduce yourself and where to burn?
I'm a very retired public servant. And, I think most people know that I was cabinet secretary, but my main area in life was the bauxite sector. And I take an interest in the economy because without it growing, all the things that we write in Vision 2030 will not happen. Not all, but
Good. Wedderburn.
All right, I'm Stephen Wedderburn. I have a background in the public service in energy and infrastructure projects, in particular. But among other things. But I'm not currently in the public service right now. I'm working as a consultant with the European Union.
Great. So folks, it's great to have you. As you see, we've not invited anybody from the current government, either opposition or current public sector. Our focus really is on what can everyone outside of government do about the challenge of creating and sustaining a vision for Jamaica. The fact that you're here means that you've gotten past where most people are. So we are engaging in this conversation against a background, to be real, of cynicism, resignation, and despair. And as Thalia said, she refuses to give in. And thank you for coming, because it means that you refuse to give in to a popular sentiment that we're not going to wear, we're never going to wear, and the best place to go is to get a visa to go somewhere else. So thanks for being someone. However, this is the reality that we are dealing with and almost fighting with. So today, let's go over some facts about what Vision 2030 is about. We've done a bit of analysis and come up with 3 secrets. Then we will have a discussion about next steps, practical steps. So things have changed very recently. Can folks online see the screen, or is it too shiny?
You have gotten the presentation.
That the presentation?
Maureen and Thalia, I sent the presentation to you guys, so maybe you could review it and then you could follow through.
Does David
That's
have
okay.
it with me?
Oh no, David doesn't have it. I'm gonna send it to David.
Okay.
Thanks, sorry.
Just one.
There's no way in Teams to share it with them.
Oh yes,
assist. I can.
You could share it from your laptop.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Thanks.
Okay, so the Prime Minister's utterings have changed recently, or over the years. It used to be that he always spoke about Jamaica being the place of choice. This year, however, in the budget debate, there was no mention of place of choice. Leader of Opposition didn't mention it, Minister of Finance didn't mention it, and only one of the four major ones who mentioned it was the shadow, Julian Robinson, the shadow Minister of Finance. So it was interesting because there was a time when every minister would end every speech saying Jamaica place of choice. So something has shifted. And then a couple of days ago, or rather, this was in September, Prime Minister announced that we're not going to hit developed status by 2030. And commentators followed up and said, therefore, Vision 2030 will not succeed. Now, that's not news to anyone who is been tracking anything to do with Jamaica. However, his response was in response to a question. It wasn't a statement. So it sounded like he was responding off the cuff, as opposed to laying out a new policy. So 2 days ago, the Prime Minister did indeed lay out a new policy. And in that new policy, he didn't mention Vision 2030 at all. So I guess we're here. Well, you are here. Does it matter? Is this vision that was created something that is ignorable? Is it something that we should kill? Is it something that we should revitalize? Or is it just a matter of changing from one big thing to another big thing and swapping Vision 2030 for Aspire? So I had to change my presentation because this was not a part of it a couple of days ago. But things did change. So that's just a fact of the matter of where we are now. What I'll describe as a very awkward spot. We said that the overall purpose of Vision 2030 was to make a place of choice, to live, work, raise families, and do business. However, Jamaicans have expressed a continuing and growing interest in migrating. So if you just measure, are we accomplishing Vision 2030, the answer is, well, the numbers tell us that more of us want to migrate than ever before. So the numbers have been going in the wrong direction. The lines have been getting longer. The sentiment has been growing. And if we just look in our own lives, I imagine you have friends who are either migrating or migrated, or they're talking about migrating. And it's not that they're going abroad to study and then get themselves better and come back. It's that they are fed up, angry, cynical, resigned, and in despair. So it's not coming from a good place. It's coming from having given up of a dream of living here and having this be home. And they're doing it under duress and unwilling to do so.
So do you have these migration numbers? They're from
these ones are from migrationdataportal.org.
So we're looking at the period 2009.
This is from 2009 to 2023.
So between 9 and 11 it shot.
Yeah, I suspect there was a change in the way it was measured.
I see.
I suspect. But the trend has been growing.
Certainly in my time, this has not been, even with the people around me, the highest point at which people want to migrate in my work. There's a lot of, because people are traveling, people are going back and forth.
Right.
I don't have a lot of people that I can think of lifting up home. I don't know if you are seeing that.
I am seeing it.
Too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or they would if they could. If there were no obstacles and there were no Trump involved and it was easy to get a green card. Boy. But you know, it's a sentiment. Yeah, that might mean.
Can you go?
David, you could speak up, please.
Can you go a little louder, David? Can you guys hear?
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Shout.
Go as loud as we can, David.
Yes.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. 80% of university graduates eventually migrate.
Right. And how long has that been the case?
So the young people are voting with their feet.
That's nothing new.
You mean the tertiary educated people?
Yeah. That's been the case.
For 40 years or
If
more.
you go again, part of our skilled labor shortage is because a lot of work technically trained people, the plumbers, the electricians.
But those are not the tertiary. But those are not the tertiary people, David. Plumbers.
No, I'm saying both.
Even
Both.
both.
So, right, because tradesmen make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And
Crane operators,
Educated
high wire.
are leaving. We're losing skilled young people. I think this is
Right, that's the story. Yeah, and Vision 2030 was intended to reverse that action, desire, sentiment. The idea was to make a Jamaica so great that we would have people coming back. Even, those in the diaspora, when I lived abroad, everybody wanted to come back. Until some reality set in and they had children and grandchildren and they looked at Jamaica, the numbers weren't going in the right direction, the stories scared them to death. And so I was part of a cohort when I was living in the States, so maybe 30 people. I'm the only one who came back. We all talked about coming back, all wanted to, for all the different reasons. So Vision 2030 hasn't delivered on that result, which is a measurable result. The average Jamaican, I think, has a what's that response to Vision 2030. So it's not even on their radar. Which is remarkable, right? Because at some point, this was our inspiration. This was the best vision we had for ourselves. But I want to say that we've had different visions for ourselves at different times in history. So before slavery ended, we had a vision of being free. Before the Morant Baby Rebellion and semi-representative government coming in, we had a vision of having a say in government. Then we had a vision of having the vote. Then we had a vision of having independence. And then there was a gap. This is my interpretation. And the gap was filled by Dr. Hughes and others. Dr. Hughes refuses to take.
Policy was probably one of the better documents that we had between that and Vision 2030.
The industrial policy.
National Industrial Policy. Excellent document which, if we had followed it, we would have been able to get to Vision 2030.
Let me jump in there and just.
There's a gap that you're creating. There are lots of other things like in the 1960s that development plan.
Yeah.
I think Seattle was
Drive
trying to do something in that era for education, expanding education and industrial development between 55 and 70 generated lots of growth. Coming from a relatively small base, but was significant. Those are things that we have to fashion. So there was no gap, in my view, from 38 to that is
62. 62. There's no gap, right? I think we'd have different views on it because as a the normal
to sell ourselves so
short, right?
That we discount some of the achievements of the
right.
past.
I think that theme is going to come out again today.
Also something on the timeline that some of those are really changes to the social structure and social conditions. And then other ones are economic policies. And now they are intertwined. You can't take them apart, but they have a different focus. For instance, I found it remarkable that between the first elections and independence was 18 years. Only 18 years. So one party was formed
44 to 62.
6 years before, then the next one was formed in a few years, just before. Then you went to election 44.
Right.
18 years later we were independent.
Right.
60 years after that, we were debating whether we're ready yet to go fully independent. Isn't that
Right.
interesting?
Right.
We are fully independent. I had another last night.
All right, let me jump in and move on.
It matters, yeah. It's not that symbolism doesn't matter. It matters.
Because what I put this up to say that an inspiring vision has the power to change everything that a country is about and its people experience. And when there's, what they say, when there's no vision, the people perish. Vision 2030 was an active attempt to create a vision that would inspire us to accomplish in every area of national life. And that, our example of doing that, has never happened before in our history, hasn't happened since, and in many countries like the USA, still hasn't happened for them. It has happened in many, and I'll talk about it. But Dr. Hughes, to break you up. So Dr. Hughes mentioned before that there were 4 scenarios that were created back in 2001. If you could speak to the 4 that were created, because they described sort of Jamaica's, where will Jamaica end up in how many years' time?
Sorry, I played squash 2 nights ago. I'm suffering. I'm not as young as I used to be. Let me go a little bit beyond before that. 2001, 2 great events took place. One was 9/11. But before that, an even more important event took place. The human genome was published. DNA of most people wouldn't put that on their radar. That was not dramatic as 9/11, but spoke to the transformation of thought and ideas and knowledge creation and where the world could go. That year also launched 2 things. The development dialogue process within the PIOG. Because a number of people, after FinSAC, and the economy was in a state of real mess, put it that way. No growth, not just no growth, significantly declines in GDP in the economy, unemployment, crime, you name it. It was a period of really national flux. We decided to go into the field to ask people what their views were, get feedback from people. Because if you can't be a planning institute and not know what you're planning, who you're planning for, what they're thinking would be. And I must say, this came from the point when I was being appointed, when the Prime Minister said to me, if you do not feel the urge to go out and speak to people and understand what they are about and what they want, do not take the job. It is not a technical job only. It is a job to understand the society and the place you're living in and how you can propel life for better. We went out, we had these discussions, but that was not even sufficient. We found that we had to engage more people at a more technical level. And so we established with the UNDP to do a process in Jamaica that was done in South Africa. Adam Kameen, I can't remember the name. Same kind of dialogue process to develop some scenarios that would get us to a better place in understanding ourselves and making choices, deliberate choices. And we engage a lot of people across the country, uptown, downtown, rural, you name it. At least one other person here who can verify this process is in the room. From high court judges to human rights people, Caroline Gomes was part of it. And I decided to stick with this because something stood out for me. The very first session we had on the North Coast, I met a young man from Backbush. I've never seen him, I don't know. And it was the most moving moment of my career. I can tell you that. Tears came to my eyes. He's from Backbush, and he was in the same room with a guy named Bonnie Witter, who was a perpetual beating stick for Mr. Seaga and was a candidate in West Kingston. Yeah. And this guy at the break, and nobody else saw it, I saw it, was shaking literally and water flowing down him. And I went up to him and said, "Are you sick?" And he said, "I can't stay here. I have to go back to town." I said, "Why?" He said, "I've never been in a room with another PNP man. He said, I feel that he's going to kill me any minute now." He's from Backbush, which is about no more than 10 miles from downtown Kingston. Wherever.
Much closer.
Much closer, yeah. These are two Jamaicans. And one was so petrified, so frightened to be in the same room as the other. The divide was so unbelievable and deep. I said, this cannot be. You have to build a Jamaica for everyone that's inclusive, and you can break down these boundaries. And we spoke, and he calmed down. His anxiety levels went down and down. I won't name him, but that was something that that came out of that process for me, that told me that we needed to go beyond what we were doing. Out of that exercise came 4, and I'm going to go very quickly because I know, 4 scenarios that we developed. Very detailed, very thoughtful, using all kinds of inputs from social sciences, political science, economics, legal, you name it. We came up with these 4. I'll quickly describe. Number 1 was a very dark, dismal one called Paradise Lost, in which a Don took over the country, the running of the country, and had popular support. This was 2001. A Don emerged and had popular support and took over the running of the country. We can go into details about what that meant. This second one for me was Nose Must Run, where it was not done this time. It was a military, because of the undermining of law and order and crime and violence emerging and social disorder. This came out, where the military came out and they were doing a El Salvador solution. Yeah. So we almost anticipated that kind of shock and awe solution. Paradise Lost, incidentally, was similar to what is happening in Haiti, with the gangs supporting a Don took over. So these 2 scenarios, in a sense, were prescient in anticipating what could happen. Fortunately, it hasn't happened in Jamaica yet, but it shows that it can happen in the region. El Salvador is a slightly different take. The Nose Must Run. The second one, 1-1 Coco, speaks to Jamaica as we know it. 1 step forward, 2 steps backward. 2 steps backward, 1 step forward. That's the rhythm of Jamaica. We do get some things right, we get a lot of things wrong, then we get a lot of things right, and we get some things wrong, and we move on. And we become very comfortable and complacent, and we adjust. Crime goes up, we still adjust. It goes down, we adjust. That's just the rhythm of Jamaica. 1-1 Coco. And that is a scenario that seemed to be the dominant scenario for the country. The fourth one, Get Up, Stand Up, is a more hopeful one, where a new generation emerged. But that was more inclusive in the politics. It's almost like the present lead set of leaders we have in the country. That new generation would have emerged and take us on a more hopeful path. um, doing things differently, more technology. And if you look and listen to some of the language, it's almost like what we were thinking about then. But guess what? The world has moved on. And when we talk about the Vision 2030 failing, the issue is the world has moved on. So even if we were to make our targets in 2030, it would not be sufficient because the rest of the world would have moved on. So when we get to 2030, we made the targets for some things, but it's of no moment because we have not just not kept up, but we have fallen so far behind. Final comment on Vision 2030. Incidentally, these sets of scenarios were not welcomed by everyone. Some of them were considered too shocking. And I remember one permanent secretary said, "How could you dare publish something like this? You're at the PIOG, you're irresponsible." She called me irresponsible for having something like this emerging because this should never have happened. But it was an insight. But the point is, we were able to use these scenarios to guide our discussions in establishing Vision 2030. Because we saw where people really wanted number 4, get up, stand up, a more hopeful Jamaica. But there was one key thing in that. People wanted the lifestyle of people in the United States. But they did not want to lose the culture of Jamaica. What Jamaica stood for, what they felt about being Jamaican. That was very, very important to them. So they wanted the high income, good infrastructure, clean cities and environment, good health care, good education, but they did not want to lose reggae music, ackee and saltfish, rice and peas, and those are metaphors for Jamaica, what Jamaica stood for. And most of these things would have been embodied in Vision 2030, which is a comprehensive document. We can go into the history of how it was established and how it came about. There's a prime minister who is not very happy with me because having given the instructions about what to do and making sure that it was inclusive of everybody in the country in the process, the final document did not mention him sufficiently. He told me it did not really reflect his instructions to ensure that it was not a partisan issue, and the PNP and the JLP as political organizations were canvassed and included as against the government and the opposition. So we went to the PNP headquarters, the JLP headquarters. We spoke to the Youth Arm, Young Jamaica, G2K, PNPYO, all of those groups, private sector, everybody would have been included. And so this was a technocratic document to a large extent, trying to translate what we got from this process here into a document of a national nature. But my last comment, technocrats cannot lead this process. Vision, national vision, has to come from leaders. Political leaders have to own this, sell it, mobilize people. Because leadership is about getting people to move from their comfort zone to another level that the leaders envisage, and communicating that with integrity and skill and what have you, to get people to go to that next level. So if the leader doesn't have that vision and owns it and believes it and then get people to buy into it, it's not going to happen. Technical people cannot do that. We can do the technical work, we can do all the other aspects of this, but we can't lead national vision. We can do other things, but not that.
Great. So you can imagine this was no short process. This was no one speech. This was no quickie that this process involved. It started in 2001 or before, and didn't finish until 2009. So you're talking about a steady build-up and engagement of Jamaicans that had never been undertaken before in our country. There was a great deal of lobbying that Dr. Hughes has shared with me that he personally had to do, including camping out outside certain offices to meet with certain people of high standing who otherwise could not be found unless they were tracked down. They took consultations at this wide level. It was launched in 2009, yes. And my reading of history, and again, I can be creative, right? Is that the reason that we are able to get through the crisis and have an epoch and get our GDP ratio down is a function of the cooperation and collaboration that happened before. In other words, if there were no Vision 2030, there would be no epoch. Disagree.
I think that, even before that, we were talking about a tripartite approach. That tripartite approach, we weren't talking about looking at the model from Ireland. We were looking at all of these various models all over the place. So that process of looking at a tripartite arrangement, finding solutions, didn't just start in 2003. It started before that.
Good to hear.
Could I say something?
Happy to hear.
I believe that, first of all, we did well in terms of growth in the 50s and 60s. I would say that what we had going for us, I told somebody, we spent less than 50 million US a year importing oil or energy. $2 a barrel. That was, so Jamaicans never thought of the price of electricity. It was availability of electricity. We were not far removed from the Eastern Caribbean in overall, yes, in Jersey and humors. I've always found the taxi drivers in Trinidad quite literate.
Barbados too.
Barbados. But that oil separated. You know what we're spending on importing oil now? $2 billion. It's separated. I was discussing with the former Prime Minister that what was known as the Third World into the Saudi Arabia, we're all colonials in some form. What separated was oil. Some became wealthy or much better off, and some were on the back foot. And so the 50s and 60s also had agricultural commodities, had markets. They might not have liked the prices all the time, but access, I heard Ovid Hill saying the last time we had a split surplus was in the 60s. That was the year we produced 565,000 tons of sugar. 565,000 tons of sugar. So we had access. We had cheap oil. Okay? And that we have never, in regard to the oil, and you know that, by the way, you spend a lot of, we have tried the solar thing and all these other things, but we have never overcome that. And let me just give you an example. We are spending, I don't know if you check your electricity bill, as I do, we are paying 33 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity. In Trinidad, I think it's about 7.
They're subsidized.
I know it's subsidized, but they are paying 7. What it means, well, they can subsidize it. It is a, what I call recondite economic argument of the wisdom of not pricing it according to the more market. But that is so the Trinidad consumer, when he or she uses electricity, has so much more disposable income.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you take the average Jamaican use of say 300 kilowatt hours, okay, and you're paying 33 cents per kilowatt hour, it means you're spending $100 a month. Just imagine you had 20% less. That is disposable income. I mean, some people may spend it on foolishness and so on, but it is likely to generate a lot more economic activity. And I tell you to take this oil seriously. This is a sheet of paper which shows our economic growth with the brilliant 50s and 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And then you saw this thing. And if you see a little resurgence, that resurgence occurred when Saudi Arabia decided for some reason or the other to bring the other oil producers under heavy manners. And you remember that, whatever, a pump. And so we got this respite. And if you notice, we are growing again. And then that disappeared, and we are either barely above or barely below. So my own feeling is that fundamental to whatever vision we set, and I have no problem with the place to live, have children, all this sort of a thing. We have never quite overcome the energy problem. Mm-hmm. I mean, Chavez helped us out in terms of the foreign exchange part, in that we didn't have to pay up the whole thing for all of it immediately. And that cushioned the foreign exchange for a while. But the price to the Jamaican consumer, and we have never, the World Bank, Patton and Wesley will remember, the World Bank contributed to this chaotic transportation that we have on the highway, that we should not subsidize the the urban bus system, and this was not economic, and then we opened this chaos. But what the thing has done is that we spend, and despite what we spend on electricity, we spend much more on fuel for transportation, because it's cleaner, it's cleaner, and therefore more expensive. You pay more for gasoline than you pay for bunker C oil. So at the root of it, I am saying that we need to have a vision. I don't think any country can operate just, even the West Indies cricket team has a vision that it will one day recover to the heights that it wants. You have to have a vision. But lacking in supporting this, we have to see how we can get the physical parameters, the economic parameters. And I really don't know what's the way out for the energy thing, because we have been trying our best with the solar thing, but somehow it's not making I don't feel it. I don't know if any of you feel it, but I don't feel the...
Well, having put it on my roof, I'm feeling it.
You might be feeling it. No. That.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for interjecting. I have to drop off for a little, so if you indulge me, just 60 seconds, and this is really interesting. Step make all our electricity bills 25% higher. And that's an interesting one that we've...
What's that?
Says.
No.
Step.
Electricity theft.
Yeah.
Makes our energy bills 25% higher. And just listening here, I think it's hopefully what I have to do, I can finish and come back. I just think, in a sense, we're like frogs in boiling water. Because the things that should make us outraged and tackle, we don't. So there's 18% passes of 5 subjects, or transportation not being able to be managed. I think the vision thing that we speak about has to translate at some point to tangible objectives, or the people will not believe. And I think that's where I think the vision becomes believable. So what does Vision 2030 mean for the lady in Coronation Market? You know, what does it mean for teachers? And I think that's the part, that's the gap that must be bridged, I feel. That Vision 2030 will only work if it has milestones agreed to by everybody, and we hold them accountable. But this is a really amazing discussion. I'm really sorry I have to drop out, but thanks so much. If this is being recorded, I'd love to.
Yes.
Catch you next time.
Yes, I'm recording.
All right.
Pat just mentioned.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David.
Pat just mentioned that she's on it. I think this is going to be one of the things that, like a housing trust, okay, may have to shift a lot of its financing to having these individual houses, financing so attractive that people will do that sort of thing, because we're spending on something that
I'm saving like 70,000.
Yes, that's
a month.
That's the point,
right? And I'm still paying JPS, right? But what's my payback period?
5 years.
Less, far less than I spent. I spent $3 million, right. And I'm saving $70,000 a month.
That was it.
Yes. So I am saying that you're going to have to take what you can't do is, since you can't change the world market price for this commodity, you're going to have to try to make every home whip. Now that raises another question, is whether JPS can survive if you have 50% of the population.
Let me jump in there, Carlton, because we're gonna address the issue of a vision, for example, of energy for Jamaica. What are the obstacles to us accomplishing that as a people? Because you can't just say a speech and then have it happen. Vision 2030 followed a process to build consensus that took at least 8 years, and Pat is saying it started before that. But definitely when we got to 2009, we had consensus around energy, for example. So we got to a point where we all agreed that this is what we wanted. And then something interesting happened that we're going to talk about.
So, a lot of discussions around Jamaica, Singapore comes up. Singapore pays 32 cents per kilowatt hour. 32 cents per kilowatt hour. They don't have cheap energy.
No.
Doesn't seem to stop them though.
Because they have a high income.
Right, so no, but they didn't start there.
They started behind us.
They started where we were. What's
their
vision? What was their execution? What is ours?
I have an opinion on that, but it's beyond the conversation today. But it is about vision, fixity of vision. Because we need the same result. We just can't get there with a single leader, I don't think. So for those of you who may not know, Vision 2030 encompassed 4 national goals, 15 national outcomes, 60 indicators, and involved 31 sector groups. There was a massive build-up. These are what the goals and the outcomes look like if you've not seen them before. So in essence, there's something in there for anything that matters to us as a people. You might say there was nothing left out, including energy. Here is one of the reports that was put together by a sector committee. This is a table of contents, but Look at the people who were involved. You'll know some of these names, if you can see them. It was headed up by Dr. Raymond Wright, seconded by Wayne McKenzie, Ruth Potopskin, various other experts, 30 others who I couldn't fit on the page. So there were 31 of these groups. Oh, and Stephen is at, actually Stephen Wedderburn is right there. No accident. But there was 31 groups, and that's what it took to bring us to that level of consensus. In fact, it was such a model of doing this kind of visioning in the world that other countries came to us for inspiration as to how we did it, because this was more than just a technocratic document, correct? This was heart, mind, soul, life, death, everything that matters to us. And the idea was that it was intended to inspire. So you may say at 2009 we were highly inspired, and today people don't know what it is. So something happened between 2009 and today that we're going to get into, because any vision that we have for Jamaica for the future has to follow a process. No, what I'm saying flies in the face of some who believe that all you need to do is announce a policy. But our history tells us that accomplishing big things takes time. So here's some language written by someone in this room. It sounds like it was written yesterday, right?
I'm familiar with those two districts, Abuka and Kale.
So this was written by Dr. Hughes. Who has forgotten? And this is just a snippet of the forward.
Go back, read it. They can see it.
Today our children, from the tiny boy in Abercur, St. Anne, to the teenage girl in Cave, Westmoreland, have access to technologies that were once considered science fiction. They seek opportunities to realize their full potential. This plan is to ensure that as a society we do not fail them. We have a duty to ourselves, to the sacrifices of past generations, and to the hopes of future generations to preserve the best of our country and to transform the worst. The outcome in 2030 is dependent on the decisions we make today. So the forward to the Vision 2030 document, folks, it's worth reading. To my mind, it's worth sending out to every school to read it every day. Now that may sound like a little bit, a lot of times overkill. But you know what? The other documents that we read every day, the pledge and the national anthem and other things that they don't create a vision for Jamaica the way Vision 2030 does. Not did, does. It does something for us that no other things do. It has a special place. So special, in fact, that I mentioned that there's a bunch of countries that followed our lead. So this is a list of countries that also have development plans. A bunch of them came here, find out what process we use, because the process that we used to build Vision 2030 was exemplary. It was almost picture perfect. It did exactly what it was intended to do. It delivered. Now, having said that, there are some problems that all visions are facing. Sure. Mm-hmm.
The reason why we insist on this process is because of failure in the past, planning processes in the past. Most of the plans from 55, 65, 68, 78 were designed around government in office. And as soon as the administration changed, it became defunct. To the point where within the PIOJ, there are people who were skeptical of even developing another plan because it's a waste of time, it's a waste of effort, and so we're not going to work on this. Or if we do, it's perfunctory. We go to the meetings, we take notes, and there was no heart or soul. we had to go about convincing them that this was a process that was going to be inclusive. It was not going to be a government plan, it was going to be a national plan. And I think that was what got people truly inspired and involved in the process. Now, as I say, it can only go so far, no further. But that point is very, very well worth noting.
Right, and part of what I would say today is that private sector people know this from running companies. This is well known in private sector because they have smaller universes to control, but they are also very focused on profit, one thing. And to get hundreds of employees all engaged in the same way towards the same goal, you need to do exactly what Dr. Hughes talked about. Doing it at government, however, 100,000 people, 150 MDAs is another story. So what governments are finding around the world I've talked to a couple of colleagues in other countries who are also have their Vision 2030, South Africa, Kenya, and all the other ones, is that their visions, if their visions didn't have strategy, then what they're left with is a wish list. So one of the criticisms of ours is that wish list is that it has everything in it, which then, if you're a private sector person, you would say it has too much in it. Because now it's hard to focus because there's everything in it. And a vision that doesn't have a strategy with it has a problem in implementation by definition, because then you can't implement everything, even if you have all the resources in the world. And again, given that we're in an extra governmental private sector conversation, this is well understood by private sector. We can't do everything. We only have a limited amount of money, resources, so we have to focus. So that's one problem that is happening around the world. Another one is a function of government. Do you know how hard it is to get a pothole fixed? I don't mean you take your own cement and throw it in the hole. I mean you follow a process to find out who is accountable for filling that pothole. Filling a pothole is a major undertaking. So if you're fortunate, you get someone who has clout, and that neighbor.
No, I didn't mean it that way. I meant which agency? Because some roads belong to them,
right.
Some roads belong to them.
And some roads are in between.
Right. Some roads are in between, exactly.
Right.
So don't have a master.
Yeah, no ownership.
So in the private sector world, this is mystifying.
Influence is also
What's that?
Influence is also part of that.
Right.
Globally.
Yeah, this is everywhere. So these are not unique to Jamaica at all. But the private sector, folks outside the government, this is mystifying. Why can't you just fix the pothole? Because in a nice private sector company, you fix the things that are obviously broken. It's easy, but it doesn't work that way in governments around the world. Accountability for Vision 2030. If you ask who is accountable for Vision 2030, but we'll try to answer that question later, but there's not a real answer to it. The common problems, and the third one, is that unfortunately these national visions pay off a bit late. So the expectation is high in the very beginning that, yeah man, something going to happen. But really what has to happen is that the population, the citizens, need to be patient because there's a lot of nothing that needs to happen first. So if you go to the average man on the road and you say, would you believe that Jamaica's economy is being held up by, and I'll show you some names of organizations that hold us up as a model for having achieved a reduction in our debt to GDP ratio. The average man in the street going to be like, what are you talking about?
If you ask the average man to enumerate any good thing about Jamaica that you have first, and they don't get it, they never told it, and they don't see it. What I'm saying is there are so many good things. Nobody talks about them. As if their irrelevancies once they become good. Because there's always a bad thing, another bad thing to talk about. When you look at somebody's standard of living in the public sector at the lowest levels now compared to what it used to be. It is astronomically different.
So there's a. That's Maureen. Daniel.
If there's an act of this coming out of this, I will certainly try my part when it is sent out from it. Thanks, it was very informative for me to listen to. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Delia.
Bye.
So a part of what a visionary needs to do, a vision 2030, or anyone who wants a vision for Jamaica, is that you have to manage the expectation that Tony is talking about. And guess what? We haven't really done a good job. We have done a bad job. The expectations have remained higher than the actual accomplishment, and there's been no communication to that effect, or little communication. So now we're just.
You said there were lights before and now. It's worse now?
Far better.
Far better, that's what I thought.
I'll give you a little for instance. As a young army officer, lieutenant, I did not earn enough to qualify to get a car loan.
That's right.
At that time. No, a private soldier or a constable of police or lowest level of public servant can do that. That's one example, and there are many more.
The motor vehicle at that time was X, and a motor vehicle at this time is
No, I'm saying they can buy now.
No, I know.
Right, can buy now.
When I think of my teachers,
Yes.
my teachers lived in Mona, they lived in, uptown, Hope Pastures, etc. But where can they live now?
Well,
I think they're worse off.
No, well, their ability to buy a house is higher now. Oh yeah. Now, a lot of people rented in Mona, and their arrangements, family, husband, whatever it is, because that's where the housing was. Once Portmore got built, you had a mass migration over there. Most people live over there. Most public servants live in Portmore, and we saw that in COVID. The whole of Portmore, it empties in the day and then fills up back at night. So because that is the sort of middle income housing in Jamaica, and similar things abroad. After a while, some areas get gentrified. You can't live there anymore. Where the Clintons live now. A few years ago, Dominas lived there.
Chris, you had a point to that?
Well, I didn't know what other slides you might have, to get to the discussion period and where we go from here.
Yeah, because we're
No, it's right.
We'll get there.
I wanted to ask Dr. in terms of who was responsible, having done all the work that went into the plan, who was responsible to sort of implement?
Hold that question, Chris, because we'll get to that one. So there's managing the gap, and then there's continuity between governments. When I said there was common problems every government has around a vision. Now, you can try and squeeze up accomplishments and a vision into one administration, but there has to be a mechanism for continuity. And causing Vision 2030 to happen and to create it over a period of 9 years meant it crossed a number of administrators at the same time, or at different times. In Trinidad, for example, for a contra example, they have a Vision 2030 that was announced by the government that the opposition immediately attacked. So if there's a change in government in Trinidad, it's dead. So they don't have a vision. They don't really have a vision. They have a statement or a policy or I think they even call it a manifesto at some point. But you don't get anywhere. So having seen all of that, to my surprise, when I went into government, and again, this is for most of the private sector folks who are listening to this, there is a huge infrastructure within government to report on Vision 2030. It should be the envy of every private sector company because we do strategy in both private and public sector. There is no equivalent in a private sector company of what has been accomplished in the public sector. it is an amazing capability. And any vision that we create for Jamaica needs to build on that capability. These are some of the documents that get produced. And they're all aligned to Vision 2030 at the top level. Now, those of you who have been in government say, no big thing. But it is a very, very big thing. Huge. And difficult for, if you're not in government, to appreciate in terms of what walking away from Vision 2030 means that you're giving up. So a lot has been done, and I know there are people who, I have my sentiments about the public sector and how civil servants and how them do not, and blah, 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 blah. But they're just not true in the sense that it ignores the infrastructure that's been built over 14, 15, 16 years to implement Vision 2030. Because it tells us that whatever vision that we have can be built on top of that. And from a change management point of view, this is just common sense. You don't go and reinvent a whole new way to implement any vision, whether it's for energy, for economy, for growth, for potholes, whatever it is. You have to use this mechanism. So that was the first misconception I had.
So can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Since Carlton is there. If we look at transformation in government, the places we can see transformation, the passport office, the
Tax office.
all of the places that became executive agencies, right? That's where you see transformation and performance. You can get a passport in one day, right? I don't know how many other countries in the world you can get a passport in a day, but you can get a passport in a day. And if you reflect on when I was young, or even today, you can go online and get your birth certificate, right? All of those kinds of things. Transformation took place there. Why? Because there was huge expenditure, not huge, but significant expenditure in change management, in setting up accountability frameworks, in putting performance indicators in place, all of those things, and those were followed through. People were being paid based on that, right? Okay. No. So you have illustrations of how you can turn something which was a completely corrupt institution, which is the place where you used to get the RGB, into a performing organization.
And I was surprised, frankly. I don't like to talk about my watch, but I was surprised that that was not expanded. I was really surprised, and I have never been able to understand because it's been the most successful
transformation.
And when I was chairman of Public Sector Transformation Committee at one point in time, when I first came back into Jamaica, and it was the most frustrating because it just seemed to me that none of the principles that we had developed during the first exercise were being followed through. It was a slack, non-performing process that I never saw any results coming out of being head of this thing. So I was very happy to give it up. But so there says I'm still engaged in trying to help transformation inside of government, right? From one government to the other. But I don't feel inside of the government the desire and the enthusiasm for change.
And inspiration and all the things that Vision 2030 was intended to.
Right. There's no energy being put behind it.
Right. I walked into different parts of government and I asked them, aren't you guys more excited about Vision 2030 than anybody else in the country? And they look at me like I'm mad. Like, what are we talking about? I said, but this is of all the people in Jamaica, you should be the most inspired by this, not the man in the street. So something that was supposed to happen didn't happen. And let's talk about some of those strange things that didn't happen.
I'm just saying that those transformations, right, the ones RGB and so on, was that transformation linked to 2030 Vision 20, or was
No.
those, right, those ones are more efficient agencies?
Yeah.
They had an own.
And that is something a private sector company would never do.
What?
You would never accomplish something and then not tie it back to your original vision.
Well, timing and sequencing.
Sequencing.
Yeah, we did this in 1996, starting about.
Yeah.
I mean, Jampa where she was
But the
hugely transformed with the trade point, service, all these things. So,
But-
those would have played their part in facilitating business
I know,
and
so
so on.
Vision 2030.
But the point I'm making is that we've accomplished, as Tony said, these different things and not tied them back to Vision 2030. The way a CEO of a normal company, the cat eats, the cat does well, who's been running around and we stop getting rid of them. But, oh, what a success, everybody loves the cat. Oh, that's because of our vision, you know. This propensity to tie everything to vision is an everyday behavior in the private sector.
But
It serves a
to be
function.
truthful, that's not how our politics is run. Even though you have Vision 2030, people have their own set of priorities, different leaders,
Deliverables.
different times, different
Right.
issues. Not to run too fast ahead, but the reason why Vision 2030, in my view, would not have taken off, there are real serious problems that the country faced after Vision 2030 was published. Global financial crisis, COVID, to name you two. Those things have to take immediate priority and you veer off course to some extent and have to deal with those issues. And in a sense, you almost forget to come back to that. You don't really tie COVID recovery into Vision 2030.
But let me suggest that we do, and that we actually need a secretariat to do this. Now, why would I say another level of? When I say secretariat, I'm suggesting that we need a way to bring non-governmental people to the party, because there are things that everyone else in the world takes for granted. That when good things happen, you hear about them. In government, that's not so. It doesn't. You don't hear about them necessarily because politics, the reasons that you said, and it leaves us as citizens feeling as if Vision 2030 nah do nothing. But the truth is, it's doing amazing things from my point of view. So my point of view, I said before, all these organizations have said that we've done amazing things with our debt to GDP ratio, with our unemployment rate, that we've done an amazing job of curbing inflation. We've done what other countries long to do. Now, the argument that Marla makes was interesting. Some things are too important to be left up to government.
Ah,
Interesting, huh? What could a private sector secretariat or a private sector group offer to government and say, you know, there's some things that we Jamaicans care about that's bigger than a party that's in power, that's so big that it can't rely on one party or any other party to continue it. So it needs continuity. It needs technical assistance along the lines of tying gains to the vision. So there's these behaviors that we see in private sector that are everyday and accepted normal, that in government are just foreign.
But you could probably take Aspire and find it in Vision 2030. Right? So, if I were the Prime Minister, and just following on what you're saying, you would say that this is your focus. This is going to be my focus. And here we are now. We need both public and private sector to buy into Aspire as the goal, or let us have a conversation about Aspire, and then distill that down into actionable tasks for various ministries, agencies, private and public sector to do, in the same way that we did for EPOC, because there was a consensus in EPOC, and there was the constant monitoring, which is what is always important, because then if you're not monitoring, people are going to just continue to, but it needs to be public. It can't be that what you're talking about, which takes place in the public sector, which everybody pulls their hair out at the end of the month or every quarter when they have to do that report. And having been involved in many of those reports, I can tell you that they're being done a lot better now, but I mean, a lot of it is just updating what you did the month before, and that.
Lock the person in the office and get them to do it.
But if you were to test the organization to see if the organization was actually living up to those targets, you wouldn't find that, right?
Right.
So how do you bring it down to my job? And I know when I was at Jambro and we went through that process, even the driver knew what he had to do in order to make sure that at the end of the year we could get our, 25% on our salary, right? Or it would chop in years when our salary dropped by 25%. It wasn't really a bonus. It was our performance. It was our performance, right?
Right. So some of the things I think a secretariat could help, a non-governmental secretariat could help accomplish, is communicating how the vision is progressing at all times, perpetual communication, because we all need it. Cut down the focus. So between now and the end of 2030, we can't accomplish everything that's in the original document. I don't know if we can even accomplish everything that's in Aspire, but the point is that we need to be together. And what a secretariat of private sector would say is pick 3 things. And that way you can communicate them all the way down to the driver. But when you have hundreds of things, the communication down to the lowest level becomes, it's actually impossible.
Communication, because there's nothing in Vision 2030, frankly, that you can give up. You can't give up fixing schools, roads, hospitals. You have to be doing all those things. However, for you to make a difference in terms of a transformation, you have to have a strategy. And a strategy requires some clear objective, actionable objective over a period of time. But most importantly, or more importantly, the capabilities for doing those things. There's no point in having a desire to take the Blue Mountain if all you have is a truck and a revolver and using military deterrence. So the idea would be, yes, government is going to be doing all these things, but these are the critical linchpin ones that will make a difference. The Prime Minister identified a few, 5 or so, like human capital development. There's no question in anybody's mind. That's a consensus item. You have to build the training and the education to do the transformation. So maybe if we had a consensus around that and maybe 2 others,
right.
But it's not about taking things out of the vision. You have to keep it.
Right.
Fixing the pothole.
Right. So good strategy. There's a new philosophy that says that for your aspirations, you find bottlenecks and you focus your resources around the bottlenecks. That's another way of saying what you're saying. But there's a new book that's out now that talks about the difference between trying to do everything at the highest level versus keeping most things at the same level and putting your energy behind the few things that would move the needle the most. In other words, there's an analysis to do to find the bottlenecks, and you focus all your resources, all your attention, all your energy on the few. I suggest this is a private sector skill, a capability, hard to develop in government. And in government, we end up with a wish list.
We have some capabilities. As I keep saying, we have forgotten that now in the private.
You're in the private sector, Dr. Hughes. I'm talking to you as a private sector person. All right, I'm going to move on. But the point is focus. And the fact is, we only have 5 years.
No,
For anything,
can
we are limited.
Can I make one appeal? The term 2030 is a kind of a metaphor. It's not a destination. It's not that where you're going to wake up on the 31st of December 2030 and gosh, we didn't make it and therefore we're failed. It was a kind of a point in time that you needed to work towards. But you're never going to reach there. Development don't happen like that. And I don't think we should start put it in terms of we have only 6 more years, and if we don't make it, there's a yeah.
So I suggest, I differ with you on this. And again, private sector. I have a private sector point of view, which is that when you have when you do a strategy for a particular year, you're deadly serious about it. It's black or white. It's not, well, we don't really, because when I talk to people in government, they say, well, it's aspirational, you know, which to me means we're not serious.
We're not committed.
And we're not committed. I'm just sharing with you what I've heard. People tell me this, and I say to them, when you say it's aspirational, does that mean it's optional? Or are you deadly serious about accomplishing this? I suggest that a secretariat or a VPOC from the private sector would bring that level of vision, is either vision or it's not vision. That kind of black and whiteness to it that would give us clarity and give us say, okay, we're either going to do it or we're not going to do it.
Yeah,
if we're going to do it, let's do it. If we're not going to do it,
underneath all of this, you have to have an economy that grows, right? Because that's the way you get the resources. Okay, government can get more tax. You need an economy that grows. And fundamentally, the thing that we should be watching is how, there are different levels. You get more money as the economy grows. Is that money being used to the purposes to achieve the vision? Because the vision does not going to happen without some resources put into it. And government has been struck. Look at it this way. The general is here. Security, health, and education take 60 to 65% of the budget that is not spent on that. Now that's extraordinary. It means that you have to do everything else with 30 to 40% of your...
But it's almost true in the private sector too, the amount of money that one has to spend on security.
Yes. And so security, under security, I was thinking about it in the 60s. I could recite every murder. When Walker King was celebrated in dispatches, because it was like 1 of 3. He was outstanding. So you had a society. I heard Paul Scott saying how you would like to have 24/7 work, okay? Where people work at night. First you get electricity cheaper off peak. But you don't feel secure. A lot of people don't feel secure. And I'm certainly not going to go downtown or any of those places. So I believe that one of the things we have to monitor is how we are getting economic, how we are doing with economic growth, where, right? Where, and because unless those are right, your vision can't be translated that easily. Because it takes money. It's not everything.
it takes cash to cure.
Yeah,
It takes growth to
when
accomplish.
They started the literacy program, they thought, Michael thought he could get it on a voluntary basis. Afterwards, it had to be institutionalized under Jamal and money put into it. So I think that while we are monitoring these objectives, we have to monitor how are we doing with growth. The achieving of the better fiscal thing will help. In fact, my own view is that we should slow down the pace of reduction.
To buy some time.
So to free up money.
Free up some time and
the
money.
Things like for the hospitals, the schools or whatever. So I believe that a monitoring committee just not should be focused on. We are focused on the fiscal, and we have to continue to focus because you don't want to make things slip. But that should focus on the growth agenda. And as a part of it, how are we doing from the growth agenda with achieving these objectives? These 2030. And I believe that 2030 is now dead. And you should be talking maybe now of 2035, which would give you a 10-year, or 2040, which would give you a 10 to 15-year run. Because 2030 is virtually.
Thanks, Carl. I know you have to leave.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Shireen.
Creating a vision
Yes.
also inspire
The participants.
to really get involved and engage. And so I think in this whole process, what is required at this time, you talk about, persons not even knowing what Vision 2030 is about, is that kind of engagement, whereby people themselves, and so you will get the consensus too, in terms of people prioritizing what, it comes back to that whole process of either civic scenario.
Right.
What is it that should be a priority at this time? And if we do that, and do that well, how that will treat with some of the other things that we must do.
I suggest that's one of those things that can't be left up to government to do.
No, and that is not something.
It's too much. It's too much. It's too. It's.
That engagement is required at this time. If we're going to talk about crafting a vision that most of us can buy into.
Right. And
that process is needed. It's not a process that can be done by government.
Right. Partly because of the politics, but arguably we are with Vision 2030 because private sector, NGOs, churches, we all dropped the ball. It's not just government didn't do what it was supposed to do. It's that we all dropped the ball. Let me go through the recommendations and then we'll have. Let me just go through all of them so that we can just get it up. All right, so part of what we've been talking about is how do you talk about the future to inspire people? How do you use practices to stay inspired after the initial inspiration? Because we can see that Vision 2030 inspired and then lost its steam. How do you backcast so that you can accomplish the realism that Dr. Hughes and I were just going back and forth on? That backcasting allows it to be realistic. And how do you manage the momentum so that things don't fall apart? So the suggestion here is that we have to deal with Vision 2030 before we consider any other aspiration. So I did this before Aspire came out, okay? But the argument is that for Aspire to work, there's no skipping over Vision 2030. I got Tony and Dr. Hughes to hear this one, just because it's controversial. But for Aspire to get to what it needs to get, you can't skip over Vision 2030. No, there's reasons. And in a Feisty article, I said that it's kind of like a boyfriend who is found to be cheating on his girlfriend, and then if he never apologizes, then the relationship will only get worse. Is that if you betray trust, in other words, if you give up on Vision 2030 and simply ignore it to death, or try to ignore it to death, then any aspiration, including Aspire, will be met with cynicism, resignation.
That would be true if a lot of people had an emotional attachment to Vision 2030 and felt let down because you're no longer pursuing it. I don't know that there's a lot of emotional attachment broadly to Vision 2030.
No, I think you're right about that. But there's a logic here. We all know that it's there. And it would better for, let's say, argument's sake, Better for the government to have, or Prime Minister to have said, we're killing Vision 2030 and we're going to follow Aspire instead. Because that at least has some integrity to...
I don't know whether that would be the politically sensible thing to do. I don't think not.
No, I know in private sector,
In an election.
it's done all the time. It's a regular thing. You kill a vision, you start a new one. It's a normal, this is what happens, it's stale, we craft a new one. But you don't try to ignore the big elephant in the room. And you certainly have to acknowledge that the process of building Vision 2030, which was bipartisan, can we get to Aspire without a bipartisan? And even if we put it in place and start to, if the government changes, the next government will come in and they'll do what happened in Trinidad and they'll kill it from day one. So there's no escaping kind of the logic of Vision 2030. You don't work around it by ignoring it. You have to contend with it in one way, shape, or form. And it's better to do it up front than it is to, I'm going to move ahead just because of, I know I'm taking out of your time, so it's fun. So the choices with respect to how do you free up this bottleneck, you either kill it or you revitalize it, but ignoring it, I suggest part of what a private sector group could bring to the table is to show and to say that that does not work. It doesn't work in the medium term, it doesn't work in the short term. All right, third suggestion is a VPOC. So a VPOC would just be a visionary version of the EPOC. Now, interestingly, this was before the new EPOC was announced. The efficiency POC was announced by the Prime Minister a few days ago. But a VPOC could engage in these kind of actions. Have a plan for, at the time there was no Aspire, but Vision 2030 that it offers to government. Reacts to crises. That corner with General and Doctor. React to a crisis, know how to react to a crisis like, for example, COVID, and know how to come out of COVID with a bigger commitment to Vision 2030 rather than a lesser one. Be ready with a terms of reference with respect to how to engage if the government says, oh, okay, we're willing to accommodate your ideas as private sector, as non-governmental. What ideas do you have? Just so happens we've already thought it through. Here's what we suggest. And then have an independent accountability mechanism, which is exactly what the Prime Minister has suggested around just efficiency. But it doesn't really matter what the mechanism is, as long as it brings some integrity back to Vision 2030. Again, kill or revitalize is what this organization could say we must do as a people. Again, this does not fit into a political calculus. But so what? This is what's required for us as a nation. The two parties, from what I understand and hear, probably aren't going to agree to Aspire together. It's not the way it's going, it seems.
Well, Julian is saying the same thing that the Prime Minister is saying.
Except?
Basically. But he says that the Prime Minister is just rehashing what has been said before, right? So the fact is that one way or the other, the kinds of things that the Prime Minister said are things that we're going to have to focus on, right?
Right.
One way or the other, PNP or GLP,
Right.
call it Aspire, call it something else. Those are the things that we're going to have to focus on.
Right.
Not to say that there aren't other things that we need to focus on. But I'm a huge proponent of the need for transformation to actually take place in a similar manner to how it happened with the executive agencies. Call it whatever you want to do. But you know, the chief medical officer was crying to me the other day about the medical systems and basically saying we have no management. And because we have no management in the systems, then almost anything goes. And the level of waste that we have, you know, she says we turn over equipment faster than everybody else, in a first world country, because we don't maintain them. And we don't maintain them, it's not part of our culture. We don't have a management culture. And how do you introduce a management culture into something which is broken?
Mm-hmm.
You can't do it without change management. You can't do it without putting systems in place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the current public sector transformation unit inside of the Ministry of Finance, although, everybody's singing their praises, I don't see transformation happening there. I don't think they're successful. I can't see the result.
Okay.
So, how are we going?
Salaries have been transformed.
Salaries have been transformed without accountability.
I mean, for my own work at the police force, I had nothing to do with them. We did also people, quality, technology. 3 things. Everybody knew that you can ask the policeman on the road, what are you doing? He can tell you what his role in that. Quality, that was ISO 9001. And the reason why we did that is because if we say so, people won't believe it. If international bodies say so, that we are at that time, people take more note of that. Because
right.
They say you're just making up things.
Right.
People were first, and so we recruit people rather than with 3 CXC, we have them with degrees coming.
What?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Head boy and head girl.
Yeah.
That's how you do
Right.
it.
Right.
So, and of course that builds up momentum. You agree on an establishment for 10, 15 years, can't get there. You reach there. Because you have to move it. The technology is there.
If you don't do something like that,
right.
And I really cannot understand this transformation unit inside of the Ministry of Finance, because
right.
I have not seen anything that they have done which I can say, wow.
But then it's actually
before Chris, I'm going to call her in.
Hire the consultants to do it. Right? So you have to. But clearly we need something like that. But we need something like that works.
Right. Well, a best practice in private sector is that you have change management expertise, and it empowers units to do their own transformation. It's not a PSTU type function, but it gives the police, JDF, it gives them the skills that they need, and it gives them the training, and empowers them, and it offers them skills that, when I ask in government, who does change management, I don't get answers.
Well, they have a whole
I don't get.
They're that's supposed to do it.
But they're not offering it to organizations that need to implement a strategy. Chris, you had your hand up. Chris? Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry, you had your hand up. Yes, this is the last recommendation, the VPOC.
So if I can just speak with what we talked about, what's touched on right now was culture, which I think is a big thing. Nothing has really been done to address culture. So I asked Wayne Henry, and one thing that struck me in the Vision 2030 was a sentence, and it was just a sentence of this. What I call it, professionalism. I forget the actual wording, but to me, that was the Achilles heel of the whole vision. That was the single. It was only one sentence or two, and I didn't know who was going to take those steps. And when I asked Wayne Henry about it, we said, well, essentially no steps were taken. So culture really, I think, is at the heart of what we're talking about. Whether it's fixed mindset, growth mindset, open mindset, whatever the terminology, we have allowed the lowest common denominator in our society to dictate or to kind of lead us where we are. Today I had a very professional young manager in the security world, and he's telling me he's wants to move his boys to England, where his wife is working as a teacher. Not because of finance. In fact, he was picking me up from somewhere and driving me in a very nice Mazda SUV, and I'm like, how is he affording this? Same point we're making, where our salaries are. But he can't take the
especially for the boys, and he made this point as a father, especially for our boys, the culture that is out there now, he doesn't want them to have a part of that. It wasn't for financial reasons, based on what he's telling me. He wants to get his boys out because of what is in our culture. So, and we as a society have really taken no steps to address this. So we've been left at the mercy of the dance hall artists. They have crafted the culture that is out there today, you know? And that's why the vice president or premier of one of the islands could not believe that there's this much interest in Vibes Cartel's concert, you know, because of his lyrics. But it just, I believe that whether the politicians, and they might say, but they don't want to say anything. They realize that Damon Crawford make a big mistake talking about curry goat and plyboard and whatever. You cannot, we're dealing with such a spoiled level of people in our society, and that you can't say anything to them. This is why if you tell a young man, somewhere you say something, no, you don't do that or do that, he beats his chest and says, oh, you fi tell me what to do. Why? Because not if his mama did tell him what to do. Rotten spoiled, and that's what we're dealing with right now. And we know empty barrels make the most noise. So how can we overcome all of that? Because these people are not listening. They know it all. They're wisecrackers. Anything that you say, and this is what brings me, I'm saying, who do we need to get to follow this vision? You know, is it the people who know better, or what do we need to address in our society? But I'll tell you a couple of quick things based on some other experiences I had, right? You know, the very powerful Jamaican word, overstand. So, two things. I said, boy, Dreadon said, vision 2030, but and a good vision that, you know, you need like 2020 vision. So I am not sure how much that plays in the Jamaican parlance, but I have found that you have to overstand. You have to overstand in Jamaica, right? Second thing, it says, Jamaica, the place, work, live. That sound like for the foreign people, that, you know, versus making Jamaica a place for Jamaicans to live. Thirdly, Jamaica don't mean nothing to people, right? There's no patriotism, there's no nationalism, it's what is in it for me. So if I was going to say making it better for Jamaicans, now I'm not into US politics, but that's what they said helped Mr. Trump win, because he said he's going to make it better for you, right? So those are some of the observations, but the one that hit me the most was what I call the Achilles heel. You know, in terms of those steps. I would have expected a campaign to go along, a mindset thing or whatever, motivation, efficiency, what is craftsmanship, or, you know, even when you talk of productivity. In Jamaica, you do things 7 times before you really do it. You know, boy, me come to see why you talk about what a job. Then you come back and survey a little more. But they're just passing through. They don't realize how much time wasting is going on to get the job done. But I find that when you explain it to people in a way, a light bulb goes off. Because most people are just living in this sea of, boy, you know, ray. And, you know, I say there are 2 types of people in Jamaica. They're the dares, you know, boy, walk on with us there, you know, with us there, and the lefias who want to leave here, right? So the rest of us who are trying to make a difference. So I really wanted to hear what Dr. Hughes thought about, like, and I agree with the point about not jumping over something, because you either have to lay it to rest, you know, and or you have to say, well, are we going to extend it? You know, or is there going to be, you know, phase 2, and what did we learn from it? But I was surprised when you said, and if I didn't get mistaken, the fact that it is being monitored and still seems to be being used. But did I see a NEPA reference there or not? Is it in NEPA? I saw something
in every
ministry,
bar none.
But in every ministry,
right,
it's being used.
But here's the real danger as we contend with this, this is going to be my last comment and then we close out. That 5 years from now, somebody's going to say, we need a Vision 2060. And all of us are going to look around the table and say, really? If we don't close this 2030 out well, there will be no Vision 2060 or 50. Because our memory of what happened the last time is that we just basically gave up on it and forgot about it and allowed it just to. So we're.
Research didn't pick up some of the things that Wesley spoke about, NIP, all of those kinds of things. So, I mean, we do this all the time. You know, we drop, we plan and then we leave it and then we come
Right,
back
we
and
won
start
cocoa.
all over again.
But do we, or rather I should say, we must, this time, because this one is our biggest effort, our biggest attempt, our most public, the world knows about what we're doing, the World Bank, the UN, they all know what we're trying to do here. And we know. And if we come again and say, let's try again, or let's extend,
Before we go there,
we have to deal with what is right in front of us already. Even Aspire, anything that comes next. And I don't want this, whatever Vision 30 becomes or does not become, it doesn't turn into the reason Jamaicans don't have a vision in the future. That takes, that would be disastrous for us.
Already written. You're going to address, address how is it that the Prime Minister has just glossed over Vision 2030 and is announcing.
I don't write a political column, you know.
What happened with Vision 2030 and why did it fail,
I would-
if it failed, or what would need to be done?
I would add that to the next steps.
We don't done yet because we still have 5 years more years
Right.
after that.
I would add that to the other next step that I have here, folks. So just to close out, I suggest that we carry this conversation to people who care about a vision for Jamaica. I don't care if it's Vision 2030, Vision 2060, Aspire, LMNOP, whatever it is. But there are certain rules about vision accomplishment and creation that we just need to stick to if we're going to be successful. I think you should talk to people in your immediate circles, but I think the question of a secretariat of a representation so that those of us outside of government can jump back into the game, which is what the Prime Minister has asked for. It's just that now the chances of us jumping in as a result of what's happened in the past, we still need to jump in because jumping in is what our country needs. Beyond Vision 2030, there is no accomplishing great things and having government be the only one that's still remembers what those things are. It takes a joined up team. So I'll close out there and then turn off the recording. Just
one comment.
all right. I'll close off my part is what I mean, and then Chris afterwards.
Prime Minister's made some announcements.
Yeah, recently, 2 days ago.
Vision 2030 is not owned by